Hello, and welcome back to the super duperiest tier list you ever did see. We are going to be dedicating this video to a single property, simply known as Smallville, which the first part of that name is not indicative of the size and breadth of the show. This is a behemoth. Time-wise, to watch in the overall watching time period, this was about a third of the project. It took about a year to watch. Though that's partially because this was one of the ones I decided to watch with a roommate, so there was a bit of a delay there as we were waiting to watch it together. So in some ways, I guess you can say this about many of these shows and movies, but in some ways, it's impossible to parallelize, which is a word I keep using, and I still haven't checked whether it's a word, this show and elements of it with the others. Because there's no Superman. Lois Lane is in the show, but she herself is at a different time in her life, and Lana Lang fills her traditional role for most of the show. And then Lex is complicated, to say the least. So this is an extended Superman human origin story. And while the pre-Superman storylines we saw in the Ruby Spears cartoon and the Superboy show could have and or were potentially intended to flesh out the very atrophied element of the origin from the 40s and 50s, Smallville actually does that job. He's not a mini Superman. He is a young Clark. Big difference. So he's played by Tom Welling, who he does a good job. I didn't get the sense, especially early on, that he had tremendous range as an actor, but he does nail the essentials of a well-meaning but troubled lad. So we are going to center this by season because there are 10 of them, and they're what I will come to call CW length shows. There are 3 CW shows on this list, and 2 of them are 20-some episodes in length and several seasons. But, okay, so yeah, we're doing this. Smallville deserves no less. So, starting with season 1. So we start in freshman year of high school, and I'll say now, they are great at actually trying to match real time. Like, high school's takes 4 years, is going to, and then it still means year to year afterwards. Like each even after high school is over, he doesn't go to college, but each year is going to be a year in the show. So that's something that I really appreciate a commitment to. Early on, it follows a Monster of the Week format, but the connecting theme is the kryptonite that fell with Clark to Earth, which is abundant enough to affect many different people, and it actually does affect humans, and not in a long-term capacity, in an immediate power-giving capacity. And it gives powers and affects the people in a way that the episode needs it to. Other than, it, in a poetic, plot sort of sense, other than it having to do something to do with their, with like what they want and what their flaws are. There's no pattern as to what it can do to these people. which, it works, even though it doesn't make total sense, it works. Let's go over some cast. So, as I mentioned, Welling, he is another one of the best Clarks. I am daring to compare him to a grown Clark in a broad sense. He's humble, but he's unrefined, which is not what I can say about that second Superboy. He was just kind of Superman out of the box, and that's certainly not the case here. He has to grow up. That is what we're watching. Let's see. I would say I usually talk about Lois second, and in this case it would be Lana second, but I actually have to talk about Lex second because, in contrast to Superboy, where the jock antagonist was Lex, they have different plans for Lex in this series. So Clark saves Lex from driving off a bridge in the first episode, and they become best friends. I know, what? And I say that he doesn't fill the antagonist role. It's a character named Whitney Fordman that fills the jock antag role. Bah. So immediately, without knowing about anything that comes next, we get this automatic tension with them as friends because we know where it has to go, and we start to see it with some vague jockeying in regards to Clark's secret, because given that Lex gets saved at the outset, he starts to be like, that's not possible. He's thinking too much. He's like, how I should be dead. We should both be dead. There's no way that could have happened, and he just can't let it go. And his obsessive personality, he's always suspecting something, and there's just nothing to be done about it. And it starts to erode away at the trust between them and the friendship that they've built up. So let's see. I mentioned Lana. Lana is in this season. She's played by Kristen Kruk. Lex was played by Michael Rosenbaum. How can I not mention that? So she's played by Kristen Kruk. I hope I'm saying that right. And she is not in a Superman 3 casting. She's dark-haired. Apparently some like Asian descent in there. It's Lana, and it's like, hey, it's Lana Lang. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. But in terms of how she's playing it and her demeanor, she is still very much like, innocent, literally girl next door. That's what she does. But again, it is for this first season, and obviously we'll get into how that might not be the case later. So let's see, the Kents. Yeah, the Kents. Up there? How can they not be? I mean, they're fundamentally different from the performances in the Lois and Clark show. When I did that review, I mentioned that they were my favorite parents of a full-grown Superman, and this is exactly why I said that. Because being there for and giving advice to Superman is one thing. Raising Superman is quite another. And basically, John Schneider, as Jonathan Kent, has that job. I don't mean to leave his mother out, but they put much of the onus on Jonathan to raise him to be a man. For those more familiar with Pa Kent's approach in Man of Steel to raising him, there are similarities. Secrecy is paramount, though I guess the difference is it's near paramount to him. but he also puts restrictions and caution on Clark's powers, not just to keep them a secret, but also just to teach him responsibility. And in comparison to Man of Steel, he's more plainly good-natured, if very clearly stubborn. And then Annette O'Toole plays Martha, who was Lana in Superman 3. This is probably the most the best known double casting across the Superman continuity. You know, it just people were like, "Oh, this was Lana," and now she's Martha. And as we've discussed, there are a lot of these that happen, but this is probably just the most well-known one. Let's see. Allison Mack plays his best friend, Chloe, and Pete Ross is another one of his friends, and he's played by Sam Jones III. So they are kind of the initial trio that is dealing with the monster or affected kid of the week. And so part of how that they work together is through the Torch, which is the school newspaper, and this is kind of their way, the show writers' way of keeping journalism and investigation integrated into the series, even though we're way, way, way before the Daily Planet right now. So, other than that though, other than dealing with they're dubbed meteor freaks because they don't know to call it kryptonite. They know that they're affected by meteors. Clark is the only one who knows that they also affect him badly. I want to touch on a few features of the very early show, including the fact that, in keeping with him not being Superman out of the gate, he doesn't have all his powers at the beginning. There are storylines, not just in this first season, but just maybe in 2 or 3 as well, where he develops super hearing, X-ray vision, heat vision. Again, just not a mini Superman. So that's generally the plot of the first season. The trouble is that I've mentioned before that I've used Wikipedia summaries to refresh myself. Oh no. And so I was looking at some of these plots, and what I was noticing is that there's so much characterization woven into the plot of these episodes, and that gets lost in a summary. So, Chloe and Pete, such plucky best friends, and that characterization gets lost. Lex is around more often than he is directly involved in the plot, because he's just kind of around in his black coat. He's part of the group, but he's not part of the group because he's actually a good deal older. And so he's not in high school, but he's like, his father has kind of stationed him in Smallville, and so he's just like trying to be included but isn't quite. And the only effect that he has on the plot sometimes is that he like bails them out with money, not from jail necessarily, but just in general bailing them out, and just doing them other kinds of favors. You have Clark obviously mooning over Lana, and Chloe for a more limited time mooning over Clark. And not only Lex's relationship with the kids being fleshed out, but also with his father, because that is going to be huge. Lex and his father Lionel. So, yeah, those are all the major points of season 1. A couple of other small things. I mentioned that there was the Whitney Fordman, and he starts to be a bully. He's what causes Clark to be tied to this like scarecrow cross here in the very first episode. But he becomes more sympathetic earlier on, or later on rather. They give him a dying father, and then he leaves at the end of the season, and they write him off by sending him to the military. Strangely, very real. Amy Adams is in here. She plays a girl who wants to lose weight, and then she does because of kryptonite, and then she has to eat people to make up for it. And obviously, she goes on to play Lois in Man of Steel. And then, aside from there being kryptonite and Clark just dealing with being different and whatnot, there isn't much Krypton yet, but there are like nibblings of it at the edges. They have this mysterious octagonal disc that acts as a sort of MacMuffin in this season, and it's a hint of things to come. And then the finale is that a tornado is ripping through the town, and Clark is about to save Lana from it, and there's this tension of, is she going to see him? You know, because that's this whole thing is his secret is so centered in this, especially given that like no one except his parents know at the very beginning. Season 2. Now, okay, so this is going to start to get a little bit more scattershot because this is a really plot dense show, and so I'm just going to be like this happened, this. But some general stuff first. So this is much less Monster of the Week, as they presumably probably get a little tired of coming up with ideas, but also because they want to focus more on the now established characters. For example, Lionel is definitely now factoring in more. He already was in the first season, played by John Glover, by the way, nice guy. He and Lex have a bit more power play this season. It starts off with there had been there had been like a fall in or crash at the mansion because of the tornado, and Lionel like loses his sight, but that doesn't last long because it was a friggin' lie. But it causes feelings of guilt in Lex, and there's Lionel is. They kind of are saying that he's showing his love by preparing him for the world, but that's mostly BS. It's actually an interesting parallel to Jor-El, who I forget exactly when he comes in. Maybe it's very early. Maybe it's this season, but he is more prevalent in this show than he ever is in anything else. And he is, with the exception of like one episode much, much later, he is completely just a voice. And he's played by Terrence Stamp, who played General Zod in Superman 2. That's super cool. There's so many cool things like that. Let's see. There's a lot of who's everyone's biological parents, especially when it comes to Lionel and his kids. There are no current like established siblings, but he's hinting of Lex, but he's hinting at his younger brother Julian, who died as an infant, and another child that he fathered, but it also died as a baby, but that's a little bit more suspect. So there's a lot going on there. Clark gets a partner with Pete Ross, who he is tired of lying to his absolute best friend, and so he tells him that he's got powers, he's an alien, etc. Um, Lex is trying to find out the same thing, and that's starting to more explicitly cause some distrust between them. We get an introduction of the Kawachi Cave, which describes a sort of a kind of like a legendary figure that is going to come. It's like a prophecy, and it's like it's obviously Clark. Like he's a Native American legend, which somehow that's actually worse to me than the Native American depictions in the 50s, because it's like, oh yeah, they were, we have this kind of apocryphal legend coming from this totally primitive society, and it's about a white dude. But I digress. The romance with Lana is getting traction. They have their first date. Lex is also having a romance with this woman named Helen, who, as with all of his relationships, he always has to think and double think about everyone's motivations, whether or not it's warranted. That's kind of what Lionel has bred into him. And let's see, there is an appearance of Christopher Reeve as someone named Dr. Virgil Swan, who's like a extraterrestrial scientist of sorts. And then in a later season, we also get Margot Kidder as playing Virgil Swan's old flame. And then she says, we were together long ago. And there's like this little trill of the John Williams theme, which gets a big old heart from me. Plus, I think it's after Christopher Reeve dies that they bring in Margot Kidder, so that's great too. Red Kryptonite makes an appearance in this. He's not as like apathetic like Dean Cain was, but so he's more of an asshole. I'll just say it. But the interesting thing is he leaves repercussions with what he says. It's not sanitized like Return to Status Quo as much with the 90s. It still kind of is. Like, they talk about those repercussions at the end of the episode and leave it kind of dubiously there. But it doesn't have like a huge impact on following episodes. But I find it interesting because I figure it must contribute to his keeping things locked away. And I don't mean powers. I mean his thoughts and his feelings. Those mental blocks are starting to build that he was going to have to grapple with for the rest of his life. And how does it end? Martha's got pregnant, which is actually kind of crazy because like part of Jonathan and Martha's whole thing is that they can't get pregnant, so they're very thankful for Clark. That's the whole deal with Superman and the Kents. But then she loses it and the baby, and it's Clark's fault because he's messing with his ship, and it throws out this like baby killing wave. And then also Chloe, who I haven't talked about at all, she's just continuing to be plucky best friend. And she turns on Clark and starts to work with Lionel, but that goes absolutely nowhere, which is really annoying. They're just like, actually, no, we don't want to do this. We don't want to put her in this role. So we're just going to pretend that didn't happen. Yeah. But I like season 2, and I like that it's starting to get more into the characters, a little less formulaic with the meteor freaks every episode, once per episode. So, it gets thumbs up from me. Season 3, so Clark starts the season under red kryptonite because he's like running away and wanting to like forget killing his almost brother, or sister, but probably brother because men are the default in this one. Um, and so there's first of all, there's the first appearance ever of Morgan Edge, who will come up in a couple of other properties later on. Here he's kind of a mob boss, but that's not always the case. So what happens is Jor-El gives Jonathan powers so he can bring Clark home at a cost that we later learn is that Jonathan promises to, like, so Jor-El's like, I will return him to you essentially by giving you these powers to get him, and overpower him and take him home. But then you'll have to return him to me, and it's not clear yet what that is. I don't know why he had to make a deal with Jor-El, given that the other time that he was on red kryptonite, they solved it by giving him green kryptonite briefly so that they could take the ring off him. I don't know why they couldn't do it this time, but well. Some other things, more power play between Lionel and Lex, but the particular dynamic in this season is that Helen has betrayed Lex, surprise, surprise, and strands him on a desert island, which is both real and fake, like creating madness in him. So he gets committed, which means committed to an institution, which means that Lionel has an opportunity to get complete control over the contest between them. And this culminates in one of the best episodes of the series, which is the episode called Memoria, which is just it's a jaw drop for like Lex's character and characterization. So he undergoes treatments to restore a 7-week period of memories, and the tension in there is that Clark's secret is nestled somewhere in there. And I know I haven't talked about how it got there, how he almost found out, et cetera, but I really can't get into everything. But in the process of getting that 7-week period, he uncovers a longer term memory that, because he was accused of killing his infant brother Julian, he learns that, first of all, he uncovers that memory of like having done it, which he had repressed, but then he uncovers the further repression of his mother actually doing it. And whether he was, I believe he decided to cover for her. I don't think Lionel knew. Feels like I should remember that, but whatever. And then kind of in another sort of mirroring sort of fashion, Clark learns about the existence of Lara, same episode. And I'm going to say his mother again because Lara, Lana, Lois, it's tough. I get it. Lionel, Lex. I don't know what this elf thing is. So, Lionel is the most explicitly the antagonist that he's ever been, probably in this season. And so they're working against him the whole time. And at the end of the season, he does go to jail because they find proof that he murdered his parents, that he burned the mansion down where they were or something of that nature. But so details, Lana, her past is starting to get messier and messier. So the main thing with her past is that in the meteor shower that brought Clark to Earth, her parents died. So she's been like raised by her aunt, and it just starts to get, you know, more messier from there. I remember liking the direction it was going when I was watching it because, as I've said before, Lana should have an edge. You know, it should be there should be something. Why would you make Clark's first girlfriend someone that he really never should have left? You know, not that it makes her a horrible person, but just that it's not compatible with his sense of morality necessarily. So I think that's important. Um, there's the, and I'm mentioning this would otherwise be a minor character, but I'm mentioning it because it's something I have. She makes a reappearance, and her reappearance is more important. Alicia Baker is like this teleporter who Clark gets into a relationship with her, and you know she finds out his secret pretty quickly. And the whole thing with that is that like, okay, she's the powered romantic option for Clark, which means that she truly understands him. So that's kind of her whole thing of being there. There's this creative idea. There's a revelation that Jor-El came to Earth, and he's just played by Tom Welling, which is really lazy, but whatever. In the flashback, he came to Earth previously as part of a like a traditional pilgrimage, which it's like they had never really explained why they send him to Earth. Now, first of all, it's like, did they send him to a populated planet on purpose? I friggin' hope so. And for the most part, that is what happens. They do it on purpose. But it's like, why? Why Earth? Because he'll be a Superman to them. He'll be a god to them. No, it's because maybe it's because there's a history of like communion between their two. Well, kind of a one-sided communion. Which is an oxymoron, but between their two worlds. So I think that's kind of a cool idea. Perry White's in this season. He's only in like 2 episodes total in the entire friggin' series. He's played by Michael McKean, and he actually does do a really good job. But like, how can you? Like, he's not even in the context of the Daily Planet yet, so I can't put him on, compare him at all to Lane Smith or John Hamilton. It's just not going to happen. And that's it. The last episode is first it's a Supergirl red herring. I think it's Supergirl and it's not. Lana's going to go to Paris for reasons, and the cost of Jonathan going to get Clark is clear now, because Jor-El basically reverts his mind into like kind of a blank slate, which, you know, it is kind of analogous to just like becoming Kal-El. He's just Jor-El's son now. And then there's another red herring of Chloe's death. She's in a house supposedly when it gets blown up. Get used to death red herrings. It's comics. No one really dies. Oh, and Pete's gone. I'm not sure when he left. So in season 4, the cliffhanger gets resolved by Martha using black kryptonite, which I might have mentioned earlier in another video, to split Clark and Kal-El personalities in the same body. And this is not the last time that we will be seeing black kryptonite. This will somewhat lead into the major thing of this season, which is the Kryptonian Stone storyline, which are like 4 different stones that have to be gathered, and everyone wants to do it. Some good guys, some bad guys. One of them shows up with Lana in Paris, um, and she's with Jason Teague, who is played by Jensen Ackles, who would, and this is actually pre-Supernatural. For Supernatural fans, this is about like a year before he would be in Supernatural as Dean Winchester. Um, the Kryptonian stones. Not going to talk about the finale at the end here. They eventually form the key to the fortress, which is it's not something that's in our mind, so it is kind of a surprise. But it's like, yeah, I guess we should get the fortress at some point, shouldn't we? Um, and so most importantly in this season, especially at the beginning, we get an introduction of Lois Lane. I know it's really early. He's still in high school, but she gets like um, transferred to the high school for like 3 seconds, and she's in Smallville with her dad, Sam Lane, played by Michael Ironside, by the way, Dark Side, freaking awesome. Um, and so, given that Lana is tied up with Jason, though she does move back from Paris to Smallville, partially because of Jason's own motivations that are secret. And even though Chloe's alive, um, she's being kept hidden as far as like a witness, or at least to have people think that she's dead. And like I said, Pete is gone. So Clark doesn't have any kind of partner in crime. So briefly, Lois becomes that partner in crime for a few episodes. They definitely seem to want to dip their lowest toe in the water. Obviously, I was skeptical about her showing up this early at first, but Erica Durance, who plays her, made me get over that. She totally won me over. I think she's exactly what Lois would have been like then. She's an army brat, untempered by her later journalistic work, more willing to throw hands. It's great. It's really great. And we also get Lucy Lane, played by Peyton List. No, no, that Peyton List. We also have Kyle Gallner as Bart Allen and Trent Ford as Mikhail Mixospitalik. And he just has the power of persuasion, which is kind of lame compared to what Mixie is really capable of. And we also have Crypto, though they call it's a golden retriever. It's a golden retriever, not a white dog. Uh, but it's named Shelby. Martha names the dog Shelby, and the dog is technically around for a long time, though never really at the center of the action. It's just like friggin' 4 seasons down the line from this one, we'll see the dog again. It's like, yeah, just have the dog around when we want. They're just kind of cute, honestly. Um, there is the first really dumb thing in this season, which is the witch possession storyline. So all of the ladies, Chloe, Lois, Lana, they get all possessed by witches from like ghosts, like spirits of witches from Lana's ancestry, and it's pointless. It's really dumb. But I don't like it. Um, Both Lionel and Chloe find out Clark's secret in this season. And Chloe begins to test Clark, trying to get him to tell on himself. But then, at least with Chloe, amnesia and the discovery gets undone. Whoa, what? They often got to go back and undo stuff. It's the same thing with Lionel and Lex. Because they go back and forth over being evil, good, evil, and like those types of things where Like this is what happens when it. To be fair, it's when the writers try to do something interesting for the character, but it's then they flounder and it doesn't work out. And then, but then they get another good idea, right? And so, but that requires a sudden change or a reversion to the status quo, which makes an unjustified leap in the character, or it is technically justified, but it's justified by some kind of cheat like amnesia. And this is particularly an issue in CW shows be, because they're so long. And because of that, this tends to happen a lot. It's just like kind of a what's that thing about internet conversations eventually becoming Hitler? I forget what that about Hitler. Something is has the potential to happen, or maybe a monkey typewriter thing. It'll eventually happen because it's going on for so long. And the only thing I have left to say about this season is the recurrence of Alicia Baker, who I said I mentioned earlier on because she comes back. And so Clark had been like, because she goes cray, right, as some of these women tend to do. And he doesn't want anything to do with her, but she wants everything to do with him. And the way that she gets around that is by slipping a red kryptonite ring on his finger, and then she has sex with him. And then his parents scold him for not using better judgment. He essentially gets raped, and then they victim blame him. So by season 5, we really are on like a full Kryptonian swing. We have a major villain in Brainiac, who's played by James Marsters. And in this, he retains his Kryptonian origin. And his whole thing is he wants to free Zod from the Phantom Zone. And we're set up in the fortress. At the beginning, Jor-El takes away Clark's powers after he fails the test. That's just what happens. Clark then dies, and Jor-El resurrects him. And, with Jor-El, it's always, something of equal value. So he is like, okay, I'm going to have to take another life. It's going to be this cost. Honestly, it's easy to see Jor-El as cold and heartless, but it's possible to see it as a Kryptonian version of fatherhood, since he still wants to mold Clark into a man, right? But he definitely has more of a part, even more than he had just Krypton in general. Like I said, he creates a vessel out of Lionel, and they start to turn Lionel into this steward of Clark's secret/destiny, and they eventually imply that it was his job all along, and he always knew that he would have to prepare the way for the chosen one. That actually looks like Michael Rosenbaum. Anyway, he's used as a build-up to Zod. Lionel is, and yeah, we're getting away from Smallville already. Essentially, there's appearances of Aquaman and Victor Stone, who will become Cyborg. Building the League. We already had Bart Allen, right? Lois comes back, and she's much more prevalent. You know, they're out of high school now, so you know she's fair game for a series regular, I guess. The status of Lex's and Clark's friendship. He keeps doing tests of Clark, and he's just totally obsessed. And as of this season, their friendship officially ends. It had been rocky, but it's like, no, we're done with this. We're totally done. But Clark and Lana, it's quite the opposite. They get jiggy with it. Yeah, they're at that point now. And it is, again, a big deal to Clark's parents. You know, small town people, you know. But the major story leads up into one of the biggest episodes of the entire series, one of the most highly rated episodes of the entire series, and that is Reckoning. Now, in Reckoning, it's a culmination of several different storylines. So Jonathan and Lex have been competing for a state senatorial seat, and the amount of corruption and danger that entails is quite high for a state senate seat. But that's going on. Lex has been falling for Lana, and even though Clark and Lana are together, there is a lot of tension there because he is still keeping it a secret. Okay, so those are the and this is a total spoiler for this episode, but I got to talk about it. So that's the setup. So Clark gives in and says, you know what? Yeah, I'm telling Lana. And then he also proposes to her. And that means that, you know, Lana goes and tells Lex, this is what's going on, and Lex gets pissed, right? And so he gets violent, and he's chasing her away, and they're, you know, she's chasing her down the road. They're both in cars, and Lana gets into a car accident and dies. And Clark is not okay, and he goes to Jor-El, begging him to do something. It's implied that a life was now taken, right? Because he said earlier on, it's going to need another life because I resurrected you. And he says, "Let me. I should not have told her that. That's what led to all this. I will go back and I won't tell her." And he lets it happen. He sends him back, and Clark does not tell Lana his secret. And the thing with Lana and Lex still happens, but it goes a bit differently, and she is saved. Now, while this is happening, while both of these, you know, separate sequences of events have happened, the senator race is called, and Jonathan has won. But in this alternate timeline, in this second one, this fixed one, Lionel comes to essentially taunt Jonathan about Clark, and Jonathan goes ballistic on Lionel, and just wrecks him. But because Jonathan's heart has been weak this entire show. That's too much for it, and he dies instead. And this death sticks. So yeah, Jonathan dies in this. And then there's this whole sequence in the next episode that has to do with Clark coming to terms with it because he's kind of in denial, and he just breaks down at the end of the next episode, and it's very, very hard to watch. And I miss the original John Schneider every day. It's not his last appearance on the show, but it is his last appearance as like a properly alive father to Clark. So the unfortunate other fallout of this is that, you know, even though he hadn't told her his secret, he and Lana are still together. And he's forced to break up with her via what else? Magic. But then he doubles down once he has control again, due to having the secret identity. And because he still can't tell her, because when he did that in that alternate timeline, it got her killed. And it's like, dude, that didn't get her killed. Jor-El probably did because of some weird mystic crap. But anyway, who does it drive her to but Lex? Yeah. So there's still that interpersonal stuff going on in this season, even though it was primarily, it's primarily, or at least a lot more so than before, it's very like sci-fi and superhero and Kryptonian, because Brainiac does eventually succeed. I know I have not been talking about him. He's played very well. I like him, but he succeeds in getting Zod to Earth, and the way that he does that is the same way that Jor-El made a vessel out of Lionel, and Zod makes a vessel out of Lex, or at least Brainiac does, which allows Zod to kind of enter into his body. And that's how this season ends. But before that happens, there is a great scene, like there's some payoff for this, like the series long tension between Clark and Lex. Sort of, you were my brother Anakin, I mean Lex moment. And then Clark is exiled to the Phantom Zone. And that's season 5. And that is also going to be it for this video. We are going to need to break this Smallville into 2. That's what it's looking like. So I'll get myself cleaned up, and I'll see y'all for the next one.